Alright guys, it's finally time. Today we're going to do the ultimate World of Warcraft expansion tier list. Let's take a walk down memory lane and see which add-ons we love to remember and which ones rather be forgotten by history. Starting off with the second newest entry in the Warcraft franchise, the War Within. I kind of have mixed feelings about this add-on. On one hand, I had quite a good time since I got into video making during this expansion and I did a lot of stuff just in the outside world. For me, the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about this add-on is definitely delves and the new Nemesis bosses. That has to be the standout feature that the War Within brought to the game. Before, WoW was really lagging good and challenging solo content, and the Nemesis bosses have really been on point. Especially the fourth season's boss, the Nexus Princess, was an extremely complex and well designed fight. It was hard, unforgiving, but not unfair. If you played well, you would definitely beat her, but literally every mistake meant wiping, since all her abilities did one shot you no matter how good your gear was. For PvP, I really didn't enjoy arenas at all in the War Within, since the damage numbers were just way too high, and it never got to the point where it felt fun or rewarding to play as a healer. The meta was just too fast paced and damage oriented. Lore wise, I kind of don't like WoW lately in general, so I'd rather give it a bad rating here because the story just feels all over the place and I'm not buying the concept of these three connected expansions yet. Overall, I'll put the add-on in low B tier because there was some real improvements made for the game in my eyes. Mostly adding challenging solo content and lots of secret mounts and pets etc. to uncover, and I didn't have a bad time at all exploring everything that the War Within had to offer. Continuing with Battle for Azeroth, I might have a bit of a controversial opinion on this one, since most people really hated BFA. For me, I definitely had a good time playing this add-on. This was my first add-on where I really got into PvP and I played tons of it. Furthermore, I had some long-term friends that I have known forever come back to WoW in that expansion and we raided together, which was really enjoyable too. I don't think the raids were bad at all. What I didn't like about the add-on was Warfronts and Island Expeditions. Both of them fortunately didn't see a return in the following expansions, since they were not very well received by the player base either. And the worst part about the Warfronts was that you had to do them every week, since you would always get one really good piece of equipment from them on a weekly basis. I really dislike it when Blizzard forces us to do the boring content just for progress sake. And then, of course, there was the Heart of Azeroth. I really didn't like this too much either, since it's an unnecessary grind in my eyes. I just want to go out in the world and play the game, do some arenas, etc. Sadly, you could not really play the game if your Heart of Azeroth was behind in levels. Luckily, Blizzard had an okay catch up mechanic later in the add-on, which would make it a bit less frustrating to grind the levels. So, yeah, overall, I can say that lots of players dislike BFA, but for me, the positive memories remain. And I'd add this in B tier, just above the War Within. Keep in mind, though, that this is my personal opinion. If you have a different opinion, feel free to discuss it in the comments, but please keep your language moderate. I'll definitely read every comment. The next one is surely one of the most iconic entries to the Warcraft franchise. Wrath of the Lich King was the first add on that I was able to play, since before that, my parents wouldn't really pay the €13 subscription fee for me, and this was the first time I was able to afford paying for it by myself. I still remember as if it were yesterday logging in for the first time on my troll rogue in the Valley of Trials after downloading the game literally the entire day. I had never experienced something like that in the game before. The world felt so vast, and it seemed like there's endless possibilities to do stuff. That was one of the best evenings I ever spent online, and this add on definitely holds a special place in my heart. For me, Wrath of the Lich King was the last time WoW really felt like an MMORPG. The leveling process was so much fun, and it took me so long to get to level 60, let alone 80, but honestly, I enjoyed every second of it. I didn't really do much endgame content though. I just enjoyed playing the game at that time. I wasn't really interested in raiding or arenas. I think we can all agree that Wrath of the Lich King had the best villain of Warcraft history. Arthas is just the most iconic character that the Warcraft universe has ever produced. And basically every cinematic with Arthas is just a pure joy to watch. And the way the expansion ended was peak Blizzard. I really loved the ending cinematic of the Ice Crown Citadel. I kind of wish I had been into raiding at that time. So yeah, all in all, Wrath of the Lich King has been one of the best expansion World of Warcraft has seen to date. So this definitely goes into high S tier. Did you enjoy the video so far? Consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. Next up, we have the successor of Wrath of the Lich King, Cataclysm. Unfortunately, this add-on had big shoes to fill and didn't live up to that expectation, at least for me. I still had a good time playing. I was raiding a bit, playing a bit of arenas, but overall, I didn't really feel the hype, and most of the time was just standing around Stormwind when I logged in. I feel like there was just not too much to do back then if you didn't have the biggest interest in raiding. And what gives Cataclysm a especially bad note in my book is that this add-on acts a bit as a transition between modern WoW, how it is today, and the old school MMORPG style of the game, which it used to be before. It feels like the first step towards a more modern game experience and away from the game that we loved so much when we were kids. The easiest way to see that they wanted to build something new was that big parts of the old world were just changed due to the cataclysm that was brought about by Deathwing. For me, this completely changed the experience I had playing the game, especially the barns, which was one of my all-time favorite leveling zones. Destroying the old world was really not the best move by Blizzard. They destroyed years of memories of players and just replaced it with a new, generic leveling experience. So in conclusion, I'd rate this add-on low C tier, since I think it's not bad enough to be put at F tier. But in the end, it really was not the greatest add-on ever and brought some questionable changes to the game. Next, Warlords of Draenor. This is probably the add-on that would make bottom of the list for lots of people due to the lack of content. Hate to disappoint you guys here, but I played a lot during this add-on. I had a super cool guild at that time, and we had a blast raiding Blackrock Foundry and Hellfire Citadel. Garrison I didn't hate too much either, although I didn't like that the Horde one was much uglier than the Alliance one. And one really nice feature that was implemented in Warlords of Draenor was the Mage Tower, which is basically a predecessor of the current Nemesis bosses. Really hard solo challenges that only a rather small percentage of players finish. That was definitely one thing that the game had always lacked. For the void of content towards the end of the expansion, I kind of agree that Blizzard should have done more to keep the player base entertained. But overall, I will not put Warlords of Draenor at the bottom of my list, not even on the lowest tier. I'd put it in C tier, just above Cataclysm, since I think Kata was even more meaningless and boring to play than Warlords of Draenor. The next one definitely was a banger. Legion had so many good things. The raids really all hit hard. The cinematics were awesome consistently, and I really enjoyed the story. Basically addressing the OG Warcraft ultimate villains, the Burning Legion. That felt epic and like a conclusion to a story that had been in the making for a very long time. And of course, the return of Illidan was a super cool story twist too. My main gameplay in this add-on was raiding, so I can't say much about arenas or PvP in general. The thing that I liked the least in Legion was the legendary system. It felt just too random, because if you got a good legendary at the start of the expansion, you would basically out DPS everyone, and if you hit a bad legendary like I did, you would be irrelevant in raids. Luckily, later they made it so that you could choose legis, if I remember correctly, or they increased the drop rates, not 100% sure right now, but they fixed it. And when I got the right legendaries on my Warlock, at least from that point on, the game felt really, really fun. And the idea of the Order Halls, I kind of liked it too, having a place where you would only meet other people from your class. So yeah, overall, Legion was probably one of the best post-Cataclysm add-ons so far. I will put it in high A tier. Continuing with the add-on that is really special to me, I think lots of you will be really shocked about my rating of this add-on Dragonflight. I didn't even play for the entirety of this add-on due to university, and basically all I did was playing arenas. This add-on is very special to me though, since it was the first time I made it to Gladiator, and in general, I feel like PvP was really well balanced and fun at that time. Way better than in the current add-ons. I think Dragonflight was the best state PvP has been in to this date, by far. And this was the first time dragon riding was added too. I really enjoyed playing through all the races on all the different difficulties, where they got really hard towards the end and provided at least 2 to 3 afternoons of fun. I can't really say much about raiding or story in Dragonflight, but for me, this one was the greatest add-on of the recent years, just due to the super good experience in arenas and PvP in general. My rating for this add-on is S, but I'll put it as the lowest entry in that tier. 5 add-ons to go, continuing with the OG experience. Classic, vanilla, name it as you want, but this one might take the throne over Wrath of the Lich King. Wrath was great, but WoW Classic Hardcore is just too good of a game. I think there will never be a game like this again in human history. Classic is really more about the journey than about the end goal. I literally enjoy every second of leveling in there. It feels like the biggest adventure you can experience in gaming. And then add the thrill of hardcore on top of it, and you end up with what I would call closest to a perfect game. Not much more to say, just putting this on top of the S tier. Make of it what you want. But this king definitely rules forever. Continuing with another really good entry to the game, the Burning Crusade. Unfortunately, I didn't play it back in the day, but I definitely played a lot during the re-release. It is really great and definitely managed to keep up with the expectations coming right after Classic. I would not put TBC on par with Vanilla or Wrath of the Lich King, but still up there. It of course stands with the traditional MMORPG values. The world feels open and exploring is a blast. Character progression feels really rewarding, and you still have to interact a lot with other players for most of the content. Story wise, I love this add on. Illidan is a really cool character, and Draenor does not have to hide when compared to Azeroth. The zones are atmospheric, and you won't get bored exploring. I think overall, I will not put this in S tier since its two counterparts are just a tiny bit better for me. So I will put this as the highest entry in the A tier. And then we have Shadowlands. I specially made the F tier category for this add on. Else I would have called the last category D tier. So yeah, spoiler alert, for me this is the worst WoW has ever been. I really only enjoyed one thing about Shadowlands, and that was the introduction of Solo Shuffle. That's basically the only good thing I have to say about this add on. Literally, all the gameplay features were completely off. Thorghast was just a mandatory grind that was zero fun. Covenants were too static. You basically had to choose a specific covenant for your spec, else you'd fall significantly behind in DPS, and the Maw was kind of a very annoying zone to play in. And worst of all, the story was so bad. And to top it all off, the villain was the most forgettable, boring, generic slop that we have ever had in WoW. And then the zones weren't even connected. You could only get to them with flight masters, which made the game feel like you're jumping in between instance hubs rather than playing in an open dynamic world. So no surprise here, Shadowlands will go right down the drain to the F tier. Let's hope there will not be an abomination like this in WoW ever again. Let's continue on a more positive note. Mists of Pandaria. This to me has a bit of a similar feel to Cataclysm, but definitely a bit higher than Kata. For me, the mix of WoW with the Asian theme was not the best fit, although I know lots of people really liked it. To be fair though, the zones are all very pretty designed, and I really don't mind the theme too much. In this add on, I did lots of arenas and raids, and I quite enjoyed both of them, so gameplay wise, I have not too many complaints. What I liked least was probably the addition of Pandaren to the playable races. It just feels to me like Blizzard is trying to appeal to a different audience with that kind of decision. Then again, even in Warcraft 3, there was a playable Pandaren hero, so maybe it is not as random as I might make it out to be. Another little feature that I enjoyed in Pandaria was the little farm they added, which basically gave you a Harvest Moon slash Stardew Valley like minigame to do every day, where you would gradually improve your farm over time by planting crops, befriending the other farmers, doing daily quests, and you could even get a dog to join your farm. So overall, I really want to put Pandaria in A tier, but I think it's just shy. So I'll put it as highest entry in the B tier. I feel like it deserves to be higher than Battle for Azeroth. And last but not least, the newest addition to the WoW universe, Midnight. The add-on hasn't been out for too long, so my judgment might not be final yet. So far, though, I have to say that I really don't like it. The game is moving in a direction that I really might not want to play anymore in the near future. First of all, literally all the content is too undertuned. The world first mythic kill was achieved in just 44 tries, which usually took top guilds hundreds of pulls, and Mythic Plus seems really undertuned as well this season. Doing plus 10 or higher keys seems to go really easy this season. And when it comes to the cinematics and storyline, I feel like this is not our Blizzard from back in the day anymore. The cinematic for Midnight must have been a really bad April's Fool's joke. That was by far, and I cannot stress this enough, by far the worst cinematic the Blizzard team has ever delivered across all Blizzard games. If it was just judged by story and cinematics, this Midnight add-on would go straight to F tier. And then there is still PvP, which is not in a good state either, with the removal of most combat add-ons and damage still being way too high. I feel like the experience in general is not that fun at the moment. I really would love to play more, but I really need a very quirky interface because I like to track very specific stuff that is in tune with my style of play, but this is simply not possible with the current interface options that Blizzard is providing. They should have worked way longer and harder on the current interface before replacing add ons. I mean, literally thousands of people have worked over 20 years to perfect the experience so that you can make your interface as smooth and functional and adjusted to your own needs as possible. Now they just have 10 people working on it for like 6 months and they expect to be able to replace what we had before. Laughable. They should for now reintroduce add ons until they developed a properly functioning interface that lets the players have the same freedoms as before. For zones and dungeons, etc., in Midnight, they look really good though, and there's lots of fun secret mounts, pets, and toys to uncover. So, overall, that's definitely a plus point for people like me who really enjoy open world content. And for sure, the housing edition is a huge win for the game. I know lots of people don't like it and say it doesn't belong in the game, but hey, it's fully optional and you can sink hours and hours into designing your house. There's really a lot of incredible creative stuff you can do there. Just check YouTube what some people manage to build. It is really amazing. Unfortunately, the Delph boss of the first season is way undertuned. Didn't even take me an hour to beat it, not even close to the last one in the War Within, sadly. So yeah, overall, it's not yet easy to judge. It depends if Blizzard hears the voices from the community and acts on it, or if they choose to keep going in a direction that will definitely alienate lots of players in the near future. I'd say there is still opportunity to save this add-on. I hope Blizzard will act on it rather sooner than later. With that said, I'll put Midnight as the highest entry in C tier until this point with room for improvement. I don't hate it, but there has to be changes soon, or the community might turn their backs on this game. And that concludes our list. I had a blast making this video. If you watched until this point, you're an absolute legend. Thank you so much. If you want to see more similar content, please consider subscribing to the channel and like the video. It would mean the world to me. See you next time.